Well, hello and welcome. I'm Mike Favors. This is the fourth session of our essential mentoring. This session is called Autosuggestion. But before we get into this, I want to reiterate just a few things that we have covered up until this point in the book and why I chose this book, Think and Grow Rich, as the introduction or the introductory teaching to where we're going on this journey. First of all, I want you to understand when it comes to wealth, economic understanding, economic empowerment, financial education, there has to be a paradigm shift. Paradigm shift meaning a mindset shift, a mindset change, because we understand that there are different wavelengths, there are different frequencies that we as people operate on. And so with that being said, sometimes we have to change our frequency in order to thoroughly understand and grasp concepts that we want to engage in order to see our dreams and desires come to pass, all right? So we started off with this chapter, or with this book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I was introduced to this book several years ago, and this book actually changed my life. So when I began to read the book, I read the first chapter as we went over thoughts are things, understanding and learning how my thoughts and how your thoughts can actually transmute and translate into your desires, physical desires, particularly wealth desires, money desires, financial gains and increase. So the second chapter was on desire. We talked about 6 ways to turn desire into manifestations. Then the third chapter, we talked about faith, and we came up with 6 ways that you can talk to yourself or build self-confidence, okay? I have a link, actually, that you all can go on and see, which is what you're probably looking at this video now on. And if you notice in there, there are bonus materials in there in the back of the Essential Mentors back office. I have one in there that has to do with a business plan where I taught down each section of the business plan. And you definitely want to go and check that out, because by now, at the 4th chapter, by now, with autosuggestion, you should be experiencing, if you've been keeping the homeworks, if you've been doing what you were supposed to do, stating your affirmations, reading your declarations, stating them aloud, then you should see something changing. And so with that backdrop in mind of why we chose this book because we need the mindset shift in order to tap into the frequency and the wavelength of wealth and the manifestation of it. So with that in mind, on that backdrop, let us look at chapter 4, autosuggestion. Now I have some notes here for you, a couple of things I'd like you to jot down. So as always, grab your paper, grab your pencil, because we're about to enter into the essential zone, and we're going to be essential together. All right? All right. Essential zone, essential together. Now, chapter 4, autosuggestion, talks about the medium for influencing the subconscious mind, which simply says in our vernacular, talks about the mechanism, the methodology of what we use to influence the subconscious mind, understanding that the subconscious mind is the place that controls our behavioral patterns, all right? So I want to read something to you. Autosuggestion is a term which applies to all suggestions and all self-administered stimuli which reach one's mind through the 5 senses. I need you to understand that all of your 5 senses are sensory perceptors, and you perceive, analyze, critique information, which goes from your conscious mind to your subconscious. Therefore, it controls the outcomes of your daily behavioral patterns. So stated in another way, autosuggestion is self-suggestion. So if you're wondering right now, or you're looking for something to take notes about, that's the first thing I need you to understand, that autosuggestion is nothing more, nothing less than self suggestion. It's very key that you understand that concept, because when you make your daily affirmations, your daily declarations, that's what these are for. You can literally put certain things on autopilot, which we'll discuss here in just a short minute, on speaking to yourself in such a way. All right, just getting myself a little aligned here. So now, with that being said, what is autosuggestion? Well, autosuggestion is simply self-suggestion. You want to suggest some things from your conscious mind to your subconscious that will ultimately change your behaviors. So look at what Napoleon Hill says. He says, autosuggestion is self-suggestion. It is the agency of communication between that part of the mind where conscious thought takes place and that which serves as the seat of action, the conscious mind. All right. Now, he says through dominating thought patterns, these dominating thoughts that you allow to bombard your mind with. Now, let me tell you something here. Caveat. You have dominating thoughts, positive and negative. Either way it goes, you're going to have them. So it is very key, very important that we then replace the toxic thoughts, the negative thoughts, with positive thoughts, right? And then when you talk about positive thoughts, you have to be very intentional on what type of thoughts, so that you are understanding that whatever thoughts you put here, as you send those thoughts to your subconscious, they're going to translate, transmute, manifest in your reactions, in your behaviors and your actions. Okay. Now, he says it's the agency of the communication between the part of the mind where conscious thought takes place and that which serves as the seat of action for subconscious mind. Now, here it is. Through these dominating thoughts, which one permits to remain in the conscious mind, the principle of autosuggestion, here it is now, voluntarily reaches the subconscious mind and influences it with these thoughts. So now, here's what I need you to understand. First of all, that the seat of action is the fact or process of doing something, typically to achieve an aim. So understanding that autosuggestion then allows you the opportunity to suggest some things to the sensories or the sensors within your mind that actually makes you get up and do something. I mean, how many people do you know, have we come across, who have these grand ideas, they have these grand dreams, but never get off the couch, never pick up and actually execute what they know to do, but never do it? Actually have a model and a blueprint, if you will, but never go on to experiencing what it feels like to start the business, to write the book, to go on tour. See, it's at this place, you all, where I want you to really understand the significance of autosuggestion, or what we call self-suggestion. Sometimes we need suggestions so that we can do those things which we know are easy. A lot of things in life is easy to do, but the problem is a lot of things in life that's easy to do is easy. It's also easy not to do. So then what do? We suggest certain things that will galvanize our mind and put us into movement, put us into action. All right. And that's a good point right there. All right. So now he says that we voluntarily suggest things which reaches our subconscious mind. And these voluntary suggestions have an influence with our thoughts. So I want to give you something. These voluntary suggestions, you all, also, once they reach the subconscious mind, they change some things, because now your sensors are firing and they're putting you in action. But something happens when you put this on autosuggestion. You have what we call voluntary thought habits now. Now, this is a very interesting concept, because listen, let's just start over from the top for a minute and understand something. Now you've got desire, you've got thoughts into things, you got desires, you got faith. First 3 chapters. So now here in chapter 4, you have autosuggestion, which simply suggests that now that you have these things going on, a mindset that says what I think about, I can actually turn it into physical things. If I add on top of it a burning desire and almost an obsession, and with that, I increase my level of faith, which means I actually believe what it is that's going to happen. So what happens is you get now, when you add this auto-suggestion, the self-suggestion, you begin to suggest things to the seat of action, which is your subconscious mind. And what happens then, your subconscious mind, then you develop what we call voluntary habits, right? Voluntary thought habits, you all, is so significant because your voluntary thought habits become involuntary actions. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's a wonderful and beautiful concept, seriously. So imagine that something happens and you were put in the place of a first responder, but you never had any first responder skills or training. Do you not know that there is a mechanism on the inside of you, or well, at least some of us, that when something happens, you would spring right into action without consciously thinking about it? Now, for me, I'm going to share something with you. I was a music major in undergrad, my first undergraduate at Tennessee State. I marched in the band. Many people don't realize this, but when you play an instrument, you have to play, which means you have to learn the music first and the rhythms and the syncopated notes with time. Then you have to count while you're marching. Then you have to step, which means to high knee and things of that nature. And then you have to worry about the nuances within the music, right? And then you had to be conscious of the person who's on the left side and the right side. So now you got all of these things going on at one time. Can I tell you, there is no way that you can pull off a 15-minute field show, a part of a unit that's 100 to 200 people operating in a cohesive manner, doing the same thing, unless you have an understanding of auto-suggestion. And what I'm telling you is voluntary or involuntary actions based upon voluntary thought habits. So what did they do? Rob Proctor once said, the way that you change a person's paradigm is through the process and repetition of information. So we would get up and we would practice repetitiously the information that was put before us. We would practice from sun up to sundown some weeks, depending on the field show. We would practice until the very thing that we were practicing, y'all, we developed voluntary habits. And from the voluntary thought habits, they became second nature. And so when you do a field show so much, your senses start to fire. So you recognize that you're right here and that person is right there without you having to count. You recognize certain positions and things that happen that you don't have to pay attention to. You begin to just understand the nuances of the song and you don't have to think about it as much. Well, the same thing happens when you're doing public speaking, for those of you all who are public speakers. What happens when you're public speaking? You have to be conscious about your connecting with your audience. You have to be conscious about your projection, how you're using your voice. You have to be mindful of hand gestures and hand placement, and content and delivery for that matter. And all of these things is happening at the same time. But the more and more and more you practice your speech or your message or whatever it is that you're going to deliver, you begin to develop these voluntary thought habits, which means you develop these involuntary actions. So now when you see the best of the speakers who can public speaking, motivational speaking, inspirational speaking, and even preaching for that matter, you can see that something happens in the midst of the actual delivery of the message. Something spontaneous happens, or something could happen, and they respond so quickly, and it's almost as if it happened involuntarily. Once again, it's a very, very beautiful concept, because I'm finding that once you get this, you can actually put success on autopilot. Now, let me get to this. Nature has so built humanity, that he or she has absolute control over material which comes into their conscious mind. Okay? Because you rehearse it. But if you recall in the book, this story about the subconscious mind and about this garden, notice how if you have a garden and you never put any seeds in it, weeds will automatically spring up. Okay? So then you have to be intentional on placing something in that garden of value. Now, when you think about your mind as that garden, if you do not put seeds of prosperity, of wealth, of promotion, of favor, if you don't put seeds of economic understanding, financial education, then quite naturally weeds of poverty and lack will automatically come. And then we begin to operate from a place of scarcity, and we begin to build up walls, which keeps out seeds of growth, development, change, holding on to that which we're comfortable with, a garden of weeds. Interesting. Now, understanding that, when you get to a place and you really understand this, you begin to do what the book says you were instructed in the last of the 6 steps described in chapters on desire. You were told to read aloud twice daily the written statement of your desire for money. I hope you all have been doing that. It says to read it out loud and see yourself and feel yourself already in possession of the money that you need. And by following these instructions, you communicate the object of your desire directly to your subconscious mind in a spirit of absolute faith. Now, here's something I need to tell you all. You can repeat your daily affirmations and declarations. But here's the reason why many of them don't see change, or many of you don't see change when you're doing it. And it's simply because you have to put some emotion and feeling in order for what's being spoken to be recorded and transmuted to your subconscious mind. Very, very interesting concept. But if you just sit there monotone, I want to be rich, I think I'm going to be rich, I'm going to be rich, it won't be recorded. Napoleon Hill says it this way: by following these instructions, you communicate the object of your desire directly to your subconscious mind. Through repetition of this procedure, you voluntarily create thought habits which are favorable to your efforts to transmute desire into its monetary equivalent. Remember, therefore, when reading aloud the statement of your desire, through which you are endeavoring to develop a money consciousness, that the mere reading of the words is of no consequence unless you mix emotion or feeling with your words. Napoleon Hill believed that the subconscious mind recognizes and acts only upon thoughts which have been well mixed with emotion and feeling. So then if you don't have emotions or feelings, think about who would want to be in love to a person who's a stoic and does not ever show emotions or feelings towards you. That would be a very bland and dry relationship. At least I would think so. So with that being said, at this point, you want the money consciousness that you're developing to be fueled, to be enhanced, to be cultivated and nurtured by the things that you suggest to your seat of action, which is your subconscious mind. You want to suggest things. I'll share a little bit with you. I'm going to end the broadcast because I don't want to be too long because I know you all have things to do. But what I want to share something with you is that once you master this piece right here, we're going to go on and talk about the mastermind groups and talk about who to develop and who to choose or put in the mastermind group. We'll talk about frequency and decision making and so on and so forth later on. But I want you to understand something, that the money consciousness, once you get to a certain place and it becomes and you put it on autopilot, the law of attraction kicks in and it begins to attract things to you. Now, my wife and I, we have some things going on and some business and been interacting with people that we have looked back and said, now, how did that happen? And for the sake of me, we can't explain it. How we met someone through someone, how we were just in the right place, how someone called us and introduced me to someone, and how someone heard me speaking on Periscope or Facebook, and how someone just reached out and said that what you just spoke touched me. I can't explain, but one thing I can say to you is that my eyes see things differently now. One individual told me, he said, you have the nature of an apostle and an entrepreneur. I said, that was very interesting. I'd love to speak to you more about that. But I noticed when I go certain places, because of this information, because of what you all have now, you begin to see things, your conversation changes, and your conversation then attracts other people, because right now you speak on a certain wavelength. You're speaking from with a certain frequency. And those who understand how that language sounds, they'll be attracted, because guess what? They're seeking and searching for others to talk about it with as well. Oh man, it's such an awesome concept. So then when you go into bookstores and magazine stands or something like that, you find yourself wanting to know what's going on in the world of economics. You want to know what's going on with the market, the Dow, the S&P, and the index fund. Y'all, these are terms before I started engaging in this journey that I had nothing. It wasn't even on my radar to even know what an index fund was, or a Dow, or S&P. It was nowhere on my radar to even thinking about Charles Schwab and Rockefeller and such. Well, Rockefeller because of rap shoes him, but Charles Schwab and J.P. Morgan foundations, and these things were just not on my radar. But now they are, and as such, conversations that were once locked to me because I had the key and didn't realize it are now opening. And I believe that at this moment, in this week, or in this fourth session, these things are starting to happen to you. You're noticing that subconsciously, at least I want you to notice now, that subconsciously you're being drawn to other business-minded individuals who think about starting businesses, or walking and developing their knack or their niche for entrepreneurship. You're starting to realize that certain things, you're seeing opportunities, and you're seeing potential things that could happen if you had the time, or if you had the proper relationship. And if you're having these thoughts, I'm telling you now, you're in the right place. You're in the right frame of mind. You're in the right frame of reference. So now, family, we're getting ready to get out of here. But auto-suggestion, self-suggestion. Please do your homework from the last 3 chapters. Write out those 6 things that you can speak in terms of how much money you want, and be specific, even if you have to go back and do it again. But I encourage you to do it, because when we get together and we have some of our one-on-ones, I'm going to be asking you, what things have you noticed? Because I can't help you start a business and go into it. We should be there now. I can't help you start a business and launch out into the deep without you having an idea, concept, or understanding of what your niche is. Okay? But these things will come to you. You don't necessarily have to go searching for them. Just be open. Do the homework, though. Do the homework. I cannot stress that enough, you all. Guys, girls, ladies and gentlemen, do your homework. If you do it on the front end and do it correctly, on the back end, I promise you, you will be in a position where you'll start to notice change. We're not in here. You're not paying this money now. This is not, you're paying your money, so you expect change. And I'm going to hold you accountable. But I believe it's going to happen, okay? So with that being said, I thank you all for watching this video. I'll see you on the next video. I'm your mentor, Mike Favors. I look forward to being essential with you. Grace and peace. See you on the next video.